Well, thank you very much. It's a great pleasure to be here in Berlin and to be able to share some time with you. Special thanks to the organizers. I know there are so many details to be put together in organizing a conference of this magnitude. You have my undying respect for what you've accomplished over the years, and especially this year. So thank you for letting me be part of this. When you think about all of the conditions that could befall us over time, the very last one that we want to ever get, the one that we wish to avoid the most, would be anything that involves the brain, especially Alzheimer's. Because when you lose your memory, you lose your ability to relate, you have lost everything and everyone that ever mattered to you. And yet Alzheimer's disease is the epidemic of our time. We are seeing more and more of it. Not just in westernized countries, but also in countries that were relatively spared from this condition. In the past, we are seeing more and more of it. But although that may sound like a negative, and it obviously is, the fact that a disease is changing over time means that potentially it's within our control. And we are right now on the threshold of what I think is the most exciting time in medicine, which is the emergence of a new understanding of this disease that will allow us, I hope, to control it. And that's what I would like to focus on today. First of all, let's talk about the brain. Anyone can have a lapse. When I say a lapse, I mean that your memory has failed you momentarily due to a lack of sleep or something else, and you're at the grocery store and you see someone you know and you think, oh, what is their name? And you try to hide a little bit while you think of their name, and of course there's somebody over here you should know. This can happen all the time, especially if you're a bit sleep deprived or whatever. However, if this is happening every day, several times a day, we call it mild cognitive impairment. You're still yourself. You might be balancing your checkbook, you might be driving, but you notice that your memory is not what it should be. And if you're having problems with learning and remembering, or with reasoning and problem solving, if visual spatial ability is impaired, you're trying to draw, say, a face or a clock, and you're having trouble getting the pieces in the right order. That's visual spatial ability. If you're having difficulties with language or your personality starts to change, that's when we start to think this could be Alzheimer's disease. And of course you say, I don't want Alzheimer's disease. Give me anything else. But your doctor would say, I'm sorry, it's genetic. There is a gene called the ApoE epsilon 4 allele, and if you got it from one parent, your risk is tripled. If you got it from both parents, your risk is multiplied 10 to 15-fold. So what can you do? Get new parents, right? Well, no. Let me show you how the brain works and what goes wrong with it and what we can change. First of all, in the middle of the brain, you see that red crescent there in the middle. That's the hippocampus. Some imaginative anatomist many centuries ago thought the hippocampus looks a bit like a seahorse, so hippocampus is the Latin word for seahorse. This will be on the test. The hippocampus has an important job. It's the gatekeeper. It has to decide what is worth remembering. So if you go into a restaurant and the waiter says, hello, my name is Kelly, I'll be your waiter today, the hippocampus says, no, I don't think so. But things that it needs to remember, the hippocampus sends them up into the cerebral hemispheres where the connections between cells are strengthened, and that's where memory is coded. But if you look into the brain of a person who is developing Alzheimer's, what we discover is that there are things that don't belong there, including these brown plaques. These are called beta amyloid plaques. They are collections of protein. So the brain cells squeeze out these protein strands that then collect into what look like little meatballs, microscopic little meatballs in your brain. These are beta amyloid plaques. Well, where did they come from? It's a little bit like an old-fashioned sausage maker cranking out the strands of protein, and they collect in your brain. Well, I'm not so sure I want those. So in the city of Chicago, in 1993, the Chicago Health and Aging Project got started, and all they did was they recruited a large number of people, and they followed what they ate over time. And then they looked to see who stayed mentally clear and who did not. And the first things that they started to pick on were things that I knew a lot about. I grew up in the northern part of the United States in North Dakota. I don't know if anyone has ever visited the town of Fargo, but that's where I grew up. And my mother had 5 children. I can't say I recommend it, but if you're ever there, my mother had 5 children, and in the morning we would smell bacon cooking in the kitchen. And she would take a fork and pull the bacon strips out of the pan and put them on a paper towel to cool down. And then she had that pan filled with hot grease, and that's bacon grease. You don't want to throw that away, so she would carefully pour it into a jar to save it. I don't know if your mother did this as well, but my mother took that jar of hot bacon grease, and she didn't put it in the refrigerator, she just put it on the shelf. Because my mother knew that when bacon grease cools down, what happens to it? It solidifies. It turns into a waxy solid, and that's a sign that it's very high in saturated fat. And of course, the next day she would spoon it back into the frying pan and fry eggs in it. And it's amazing that any of her children lived to adulthood, but that's the way we lived. So there's a lot of saturated fat in bacon grease, but the number one source is actually dairy products. Cheese, whole milk, yogurt, these are the principal contributors of saturated fat. It's also in meat and eggs, some in chocolate. Now, in Chicago, some people ate relatively little saturated fat, 13 grams a day. Some people ate much more, 25 grams a day. And the question is, does that affect their risk of getting Alzheimer's? Well, let's have a look. Let's see what the numbers look like. Okay, there's the low group. These are the people who have relatively little saturated fat in their diet, but the people who had much more saturated fat had a much higher risk of developing Alzheimer's disease. Now, it depends on how you do the analysis, but the risk is doubled or even tripled or more. So where is all this saturated fat coming from? Well, if I have 2 eggs, that's about 3 grams. If I have 1 strip of bacon, that's 1 more gram. And do you know anyone who has 1 strip of bacon? A chicken thigh without the skin, 4.5 grams. A glass of whole milk, another 4.5 grams. Pizza for 1, which Americans are very fond of. That contributes another 12 grams. Do you know people who eat these foods? Lots and lots and lots of people are eating these foods. But if you add them up, that puts you in the high-risk group for Alzheimer's disease. All right. Now, it's not just Alzheimer's. Do you remember that condition, mild cognitive impairment, where you're still yourself? You might be driving, but your memory is sputtering. You're having lapses every day. Well, researchers in Finland brought in more than 1,000 adults. They were 50 years old, and they tracked their fat intake. And some people ate relatively little saturated fat, some much more. And they looked at whether they developed mild cognitive impairment. And you see the same kind of difference. The people who avoid the saturated fat had less risk over time of developing not Alzheimer's, but just old age memory problems. Well, what about that gene? That ApoE epsilon 4 allele, the one that condemns you to Alzheimer's disease. Well, now focusing only on those individuals. Some of them had low saturated fat intake, some high, but when you look at their risk of developing mild cognitive impairment, it was even greater. And this is very, very important. Genes are not destiny. Genes are in 2 categories. There are genes like the genes that say blue eyes. Those are dictators. They give orders, and you are going to have blue eyes. But the genes for Alzheimer's disease are more like committees. They make suggestions, and you could get Alzheimer's disease or maybe not. And many of the genes for health conditions are not dictators at all. They are committees that say, you could get diabetes. You could get cancer. You could have heart problems. But we have a lot of control. We don't have to take their orders, and we can fight back. But we can only do that if we know how to do that. And these studies are showing us. Oh yes, what's this? There's fat in there too, right? What's the fat in a donut or a cake or a pastry? What is that called? Anybody know? Trans fats, does that sound familiar? Trans fats are partially hydrogenated vegetable oils. And some people in Chicago know what a donut is, and some people tend to avoid them. And so we are going to do the same analysis with trans fats. And what we see is that the people who avoid trans fats generally do pretty well. The people who dig in have a much higher risk. So all we are doing is looking at things that we can control. It's the saturated fat in dairy products, and in meat, and in similar foods, and also the trans fats. When you eat a lot of them, if the statistics in Chicago apply to you, your risk is much, much higher. So, why? Why would bad fat increase my risk? Some researchers at the Kaiser Permanente health system in the United States thought it might be cholesterol. Bad fats raise my cholesterol level. Maybe that in turn is affecting the brain. So they separated a group of individuals, almost 10,000 people, into 4 groups. Low cholesterol, higher, higher, highest. And they found that their risk of Alzheimer's went up just the same way. The higher your cholesterol level, the higher your risk of Alzheimer's. So we have not written the last word on this yet. But what we think is happening is that when you have a high cholesterol level, in the same way as it affects the heart, it can also affect the brain. All right? So let's say I live in Chicago, and I'm eating all these foods, and my risk is now high. Can I change my diet? Can I? Can I get rid of some of this stuff? Okay, let's see what we can do. All right, I'm going to get rid of the whole milk. Have you tasted almond milk or soya milk? Is it okay? Sure. And I've gotten rid of, maybe about 5 grams of saturated fat. And if the numbers in this research apply to me, my risk should theoretically be lower. Is there something else that I can get rid of? What else? What else? Okay, let's get rid of the bacon. We'll try veggie bacon. That's sort of a liberal interpretation of the original. We'll get rid of the eggs and bring in some porridge. Get rid of the chicken. We'll have a vegetable sandwich. Let's see how I do. I'm doing better. So again, if the statistics that were shown in Chicago were to apply to me, my risk should be lower. What else can I do? Pizza? Pizza? Can I have a pizza with no cheese? Can I? Okay, let's try that. There goes that one. That's pizza with no cheese. All right, let's see how I do. Well, I don't know, because no one in Chicago eats that well. However, there are some people who do better. In Loma Linda, California, you heard Dr. Fraser talking yesterday. Among Seventh-day Adventists, you have many health-conscious people, but some avoid meat, some eat meat. And the meat eaters, if you track their cognitive decline over time, they don't do so well. If you compare them to vegetarians, the vegetarians do somewhat better. Now, this may be the cheese-eating vegetarians, so if you look at those who skip the dairy products and follow a vegan diet, we would expect perhaps they would do better still. Now, is there something else in those plaques in the brain? We talked about the beta amyloid protein, and there's something about cholesterol. But there's also iron and copper in the brain. Now, if you think about it, if I have an iron pan, a fry pan, and I had a party last weekend, and I left my frying pan out on my table in my backyard, and then it rained last week, what happened to my pan? It's rusted now. It's all covered with rust. That rust is a sign of oxidation. And if I have a coin made of copper, it will oxidize also. Now, that oxidation process doesn't only happen in the cast iron pan and in the copper coin. It also happens in your body. So if you are eating a little bit of iron and a little copper, that's good. Your body needs a tiny amount. But if you're eating too much of these things, if you're eating foods that are too rich in iron and too rich in copper, these foods contribute these metals into your bloodstream. They will oxidize, and as they do so, they produce free radicals, and you know about free radicals. They are responsible for many aspects of the aging process, and I think of them as being like the little sparks that singe through the connections from one brain cell to the next. So let's say I have a cast iron pan, or maybe I have copper pipes in my house. If you have these things, the water will stay in your copper pipes all night long, and then you fill your coffee maker in the morning, you're getting too much copper. If you're using a cast iron pan once a month, who cares? No big deal. But if it's every day, you're getting much more iron. If you are eating meat, or especially liver, you're getting a huge amount of both iron and copper. Now, many people take multiple vitamins, and that's not a bad idea, except that to sell them, they also add iron, and they add copper, so that they can promise you'll get everything you need in these pills. The problem is you're already getting iron in food. You're already getting copper in food, and now you're getting too much. So there are now brands that are free of iron, but they are 20 years behind the science, and they're still leaving plenty of copper in there, and in my view, that's a mistake. So if you're taking a vitamin pill, take one that is only vitamins, or to tell you the truth, there are relatively few that would be recommended anyway, like vitamin B12, or vitamin D. You can get just those supplements alone and skip the rest, all right? So if what I'm saying is true, that if you're eating iron, you're eating copper, they are oxidizing in your body, and they are throwing off free radicals that are destroying the brain, then I need a fire extinguisher, and I have one. It's called vitamin E. Vitamin E is an antioxidant, and it will neutralize free radicals. And it's in spinach, it's in mangoes, and especially in nuts and seeds. There's lots and lots of vitamin E in these foods. Now, in Chicago, some people ate these foods, and some people tended to ignore them. So let me compare the low vitamin E group and the high vitamin E group. If my theory is correct, then the people who are missing vitamin E, those people should be at higher risk. Well, let's see how the numbers, well, there you go. Okay, so the people who are tending to get more vitamin E do better. The people who miss it tend to do worse. All right, so all we are doing is adding up things I can do. Avoid saturated fat, avoid trans fats, make sure I get plenty of vitamin E. So what should I do? Run to the store and buy bottles of vitamin E? No, I don't think so. It's in broccoli and spinach and sweet potatoes and mangoes and these things, but much more in nuts and in seeds. And this is important because in food, there are 8 different forms of vitamin E. In a pill, there can be 1 or 2, and it can legally be sold as vitamin E. The problem is, when you swallow just one form, it can interfere with your absorption of the other forms. So you don't want vitamin E in a pill, you want it in foods. In the Chicago study, about 8 milligrams a day was the effective amount. And if I have just 1 ounce of nuts or seeds, that's 5 milligrams. That's the amount in your hand. If you pour in the nuts or seeds, before it hits your fingers, that's 1 ounce, okay? That's all you need. And then the other thing is, be very careful, don't eat it. Because if you do, you're going to fill your hand again. And then you're going to eat that. And you're going to fill your hand again. And I don't know what it is about cashews and peanuts, but personally, I can't stop eating them. So a better approach is to put them in your hand and crumble them up and put them on your salad. Use them as an ingredient, use them as a flavoring, and that way you'll get the vitamin E you need without overdoing it, okay? I know what you're talking about. Avoid the bad fats, get vitamin E. That sounds like the Mediterranean diet. And it is sort of Mediterranean. In the Mediterranean regions, people often have better health. They have less heart disease. And some people will say, but it's because they drink lots of wine, red wine. And when I was in college, I think I had many friends who thought they were following the Mediterranean diet. However, there are problems with alcohol. It increases the risk of breast cancer, even 1 drink per day. If it's every day, a woman is at higher risk of breast cancer. So researchers said, well, wait, maybe it's not the alcohol. Maybe there's something about the grape that is somehow protecting us. Now, it's still early days, but researchers at the University of Cincinnati did an interesting study. They brought in a group of older people. They were 78 years old on average. They all were already having memory problems. They had mild cognitive impairment. And what they asked them to do was to have a pint a day, that's about half a liter, of grape juice. A little bit, maybe a quarter liter in the morning, quarter liter at night. And what they found is that their learning was better and their recall was better. It sounds too easy. Wait a minute, how can that be? Well, if you think about it, a grape has a difficult life. A grape has to sit on the vine all day long under the hot sun and exposed to the elements, and it has no protection at all. Or does it? Well, actually, that purple color in the grape, that color, that pigment, is anthocyanins, and the anthocyanins are antioxidants. They protect the grape. Will they protect you? I'm not sure, but what we can do is maybe test this. There are other foods that have anthocyanins also, like blueberries. Let's test them back into the laboratory, and we find just the same result. Now, I think we should be cautious in interpreting these studies. They're small, and industry is busily trying to sell you grape juice and blueberries. However, if there's something about taking advantage of the pigments that nature makes available to us. If you think about it, fruits and grains and vegetables and legumes, there are many, many colors in nature. If you go into a store, a grocery store, the human retina evolved to be able to detect antioxidants at 100 meters. You can see the orange color in carrots or in sweet potatoes, that's beta-carotene. The red color in a tomato or in watermelon, that's lycopene. The anthocyanins that give that deep purple color to blueberries and to grapes, you can see those from 100 meters away. Now, if your cat were to walk into the very same grocery store, your cat does not have the same color vision. Your cat is a carnivore and has no interest in a carrot. Your cat is looking for motion. And so if there's a little mouse 100 yards away, your cat is off like a light. But on the other hand, the human retina is designed to be attracted to antioxidants, to detect them, to be able to separate beta-carotene from lycopene. They're related, but they're different, and to want them all into our diet. And of course, nowadays, we take these beautiful colors and we put them into candy bags. We call them M&Ms and things like that. But nature wanted us to go and take advantage of these, and that's what the retina is designed for. Okay, so I'm avoiding all the bad fats. Well, are there extra benefits from that? Well, maybe. As you know, a gram of fat has 9 calories. A gram of carbohydrate, whether it's from bread or rice or potatoes, has only 4. So if I'm avoiding bad fats for my brain, maybe it will help my waistline. Well, this is a man named Jean Remy from Canada. He sent me these pictures because he weighed 320 pounds. And he had prediabetes, and he picked up a book that I wrote about reversing diabetes, which said, get away from animal products, keep oils very low, And by the time he got to chapter 4, he'd lost 160 pounds, and he regained his energy, not from limiting food at all, but simply avoiding the bad foods. This is Jenna, same story. She wanted to lose some weight, but not by lowering her calorie intake, but simply by changing the type of food she was eating. A vegan diet, no animal products at all, keeping oils low, and she got her waistline back and her confidence back. But more importantly, she got her health back. What about supplements? There are 2 vitamin supplements that I think you should be thinking about. The first is vitamin B12. B12 is not made by animals, it's not made by plants, it's made by bacteria. And some people will say that the bacteria in the soil, on our fingers, in our mouths, they will create the tiny traces of B12 that we need. Personally, I don't think that's a reliable source now, if it ever was. Now, a meat eater will get B12 because in a cow's intestinal tract, there are bacteria that make B12, and that will get into the meat and into the dairy products. If you're following a vegan diet, which I strongly recommend, it's important to take a B12 supplement. They're cheap and they're easy to get anywhere. The amount you need is very small, 2.4 micrograms per day. It's very easy, and all the supplements have more than that, but you don't want to miss it. By the way, I should mention that if you go into a medical clinic, most of the people who are low in B12 are meat eaters. They're not vegan. They're meat eaters, but they're either older, so they're not making much stomach acid, so they can't pull the B12 out of the protein, or they're on a medication like metformin or an acid-blocking drug, and they're becoming low in B12. So they should be taking B12 too. But for vegans, it's essential. Now, vitamin D normally comes from the sun, and that's the only source you need, except that people had the bad judgment of leaving Africa and moving to Berlin. And unfortunately, the sun here is less reliable. And so if you're indoors a lot, you'll want to take a vitamin D supplement, and that will give you the vitamin D you need. What it will do is it will help you to absorb calcium from the foods you eat, and it has an anti-cancer effect as well. Now, food is not everything. There's a role for exercise as well. So it's good to get physically active and lace up your sneakers and go out for a run. At the University of Illinois, researchers brought in 120 adults, and they asked them to take a brisk walk 3 times a week. So what they found is that this reduced brain shrinkage, especially in the hippocampus, which is Latin for cirrus. Very good. Who's had their asparagus today? Good. It also improved memory. So exercise seems to reverse brain shrinkage, at least to a degree. So I have an exercise program that I would recommend for you. I do this myself very carefully, and I think you should too. You arrive at the airport as late as possible, carry massively heavy luggage, and just run for the plane. And I do that 3 times a week, and it keeps me very fit. However, at the University of Illinois, they had their own ideas about how to do this, and what they did was a 10-minute walk. 10 minutes, Monday, Wednesday, Friday. Then the next week, 15 minutes, Monday, Wednesday, Friday. The next week, 20 minutes. You're just increasing by 5 minutes a week. And once you get to 40, that's it. That's the level that has been shown to reverse brain shrinkage. Now, can you do more? Sure. The more exercise, really, the better. But just 40 minutes, brisk walk 3 times a week is what you need. Also, there's something to be said for language. And this was really discovered in Canada. In Canada, many people have only 1 language, but many other people have 2. And those people who speak 2 languages were delaying their cognitive decline by as much as 5 years. If you speak 3 languages, even better. Or 4, better still. However, if you learned a language in high school, it's no good now. It's only a question of whether you're using it. And if you're using it, the theory is that that will help protect the brain functions. So I encourage you to engage in many intellectual activities, documentaries, read newspapers. This is my favorite newspaper, but you may have your own favorites as well. And crossword puzzles, anagrams, anything that has to do with words is helpful for the brain. So one day I was sitting in a lecture by Dean Ornish. Do you know Dr. Dean Ornish? He's a medical genius. He showed that you can reverse heart disease with a plant-based diet and an otherwise healthy lifestyle, that the arteries open up again. And I was sitting in a lecture that Dr. Ornish gave, and he said, if I focus too much on myself, I will be ill. But if I take advantage of the support of a group, then I can be well. If I focus on we, I can be well. And that was a very nice point that he was making. But while he was saying that, my mind was going in a different direction. I thought, isn't that cool? There are words hidden inside other words. That might be good for my brain. So I started taking other words like this one and moving around the letters. And it's interesting to see what happens if you rearrange things enough. You come up with words like that. And so trust me, people, this is good for your cognitive function. Now, whether it's physical activity or intellectual activity, it's important to stop. You have to stop, because your brain needs to recover. In the first half of the night, if I put EEG leads on your head and I measure your brain waves, in the first half of the night, what is predominating is slow wave sleep. And that's when the brain is integrating words and integrating facts, experiences of the day. And the second half of the night is when your brain is engaged in REM sleep, rapid eye movement. You're dreaming. And that's when the brain is integrating motor skills, like playing golf or playing the guitar, or also emotions. If you stay up all night, or if you're sleep deprived for several nights in a row, you'll discover that your memory is not so good, words and names start dropping out, and your emotional control is not good either. And it gets worse. Do you remember my sausage maker? That cranking out the beta amyloid strands, it turns down at night, except if you stay awake. If you're awake all night, then the beta amyloid loses its diurnal variation, and it continues, the amyloid is continued to be produced all night long. So my most important medical device that I encourage all of my patients to buy is this one. I don't care how good your book is, or how good the television documentary is, at 10 o'clock, turn it off and go to sleep. And if you wake up even a little early the next morning, you'll find you feel much, much, much better. Okay, so let's check our scorecard. Can I avoid bad fats? Can I? Of course, easy. Now that I know where they are, it's not hard. Can I avoid the excess metals? Sure I can. Can I eat vitamin-rich foods? That's pretty easy too. Can I take vitamin B12? Yes. Can I get physical activity? Well, maybe. If I put it on my schedule and if someone else knows I'm going to do it and will call me if I miss, then I'm okay. Can I get mental stimulation? No problem there. We're getting lots of that. Can I go to sleep? Well, maybe. But if we do that, we're going to do better. And I also put on this list medications. If you know anyone who has a sudden change in their mental status, one of the things to do is to go into their bathroom and look into the medicine cabinet and see what's new. Medications very, very often can cause serious brain problems, and new combinations of medicine can do this. Even something as safe appearing as a statin drug used to control cholesterol. We have had hundreds of reports of people on statin drugs who have had memory problems severe enough that they were confined to a nursing home and diagnosed with Alzheimer's disease that cleared up when they stopped the medication, they packed their bags, and they went home. Now, this is a rare side effect, but it does happen. So be very alert to medications. And by the way, 90% of people on statin drugs for their cholesterol do not need them. They are taking them because they are eating cheese. And they're eating meat. Or they think that fish and chicken is somehow healthful, not recognizing that fish and chicken are animal products and the animal cells are making cholesterol day after day after day after day. And when you eat them, your blood cholesterol rises and you get a problem that your doctor will attribute to genetics, and then you are condemned to taking medication for the rest of your life, which you never needed because that was not the issue. There are people who, despite a healthy diet, will have a high cholesterol level, and for them it's sensible to consider medications. But that should be thought of as alternative medicine. The power plate. We, in 2009, my group, the Physicians Committee, presented this to the US government and said we had been using a pyramid, which you remember before that. The pyramid was a nice shape, but people eat from a plate. So we said, give them a plate, and you don't need a meat group. You should have fruits and grains and vegetables and legumes, legumes meaning beans and lentils and peas. And we did not hear back from the government. So in 2011, we filed a lawsuit in federal court to compel the government to respond. And in 2011, the US government adopted what they call My Plate. This is now official US government policy. And as I'm not taking any credit for this, but you will notice a few similarities. The fruits and grains and vegetables are all there. They're calling it a protein group, but they say that could be meat, but it could be beans, it could be tofu, it could be nuts. It doesn't have to be meat. And for the first time in US history, there is no meat group, period. Thank you. There is a dairy group, but to their credit, they say that soya milk counts. That's perfectly fine. So a vegan diet is perfectly okay with the US government. All right. So by now, if you are new to this, if you were dragged to this conference by a well-meaning friend, and you're thinking, well, this all sounds lovely, but I don't think I could ever do a vegan diet because if I do, no one will ever invite me out to dinner again. We have found ways of introducing people to this diet, and I'd like to just share them with you. We break it into 2 steps. I have never seen anyone unable to do this diet. The first step is don't change your diet. Just check out the possibilities. So what I mean by that is take a week and think about what you would like to eat that has no animal products in it at all. So I take a piece of paper and I write breakfast, lunch, dinner, snack. And over the next week, my whole job is just to put foods on this list. So what would that mean? Oatmeal for breakfast, or maybe blueberry pancakes. And I could have bran flakes with almond milk. I'm just thinking, what would I like? And the same thing for lunch. I never had pizza with no cheese. Let me try it. I never tried the veggie burger. Let me try that. So we're just trying these things. And then I'm going to an Italian restaurant. Will an Italian restaurant make me a vegan meal? Sure they will. They'll give you a salad and a nice vegetable soup. And when your spaghetti comes, they'll top it with a tomato sauce or fresh pesto. A Mexican restaurant is more than happy to give you bean burritos, veggie fajitas, beans and rice. Chinese restaurants, dozens and dozens of choices, from rice to vegetables to tofu. Japanese restaurants, same story. Very delicate foods. The vegetable sushi, always a better choice. Or if you go to a fast food chain, this is not the pinnacle of culinary art, but they're more than happy to work with you, and they'll provide veggie options as well. So, after a week, you've found it. You've got your breakfasts, you've got lunches, you've got dinners, you even know what you'll have at a restaurant. And then step 2, jump in. For the next 3 weeks, have it all vegan all the time. And at the end of 21 days, what you discover is 2 things. First of all, you're healthier. You're losing weight, your energy's better, your digestion is better. If you have diabetes, your blood sugars are improving, everything's getting better. But the other thing is that your tastes have changed. And we used to see this with people who were drinking whole milk, full-fat milk. I don't know if you've had this experience. When people go from whole milk, the fatty milk, to skim milk, non-fat milk, at first, tastes kind of watery, not very good. But after a few weeks, they get used to it. And then if they ever go back and they taste the fatty milk again, the whole milk, it tastes like cream. It tastes almost like paint. They don't like it anymore. Well, the first week on a vegan diet, it will seem a little bit light. You'll think, oh, do I have to acquire a taste for folk music now? Do I have to wear tie-dyed clothes? Oh, I'm vegan, yippee, great. Well, what you discover is the second week you're on it, everything starts to make sense. You're finding foods you like, you're finding recipes you like. At the store, you see there are many, many products, and there are a lot of celebrities doing this, and there are athletes doing this. And President Bill Clinton is doing this, and his vice president is doing it. And lots of people are going vegan. It's the thing to do. And you suddenly discover you're not alone. And after about 3 or 4 weeks, it is very, very easy. It's not difficult at all. And all of your friends are asking, how did you get so healthy looking? You look fantastic. Give me your advice. And you are now the nutrition expert. And if after 4 or 5 weeks you went back and had a double bacon cheeseburger, you discover that you're just past it. Those foods don't call to you anymore. But if I tell you that now, you wouldn't believe me. But after a little time, you discover it's true. There are also transition foods. Instead of meat sausage, there is veggie sausage. I'm not recommending it, but it's there. And you can have these as a bridge if you want them. If you would like, please take advantage of our Kickstart program. It's the 21-day vegan Kickstart, and you'll find it at pcrm.org, Physicians Committee for Responsible Medicine.org. What we do is every month we start off with an email that includes menus and recipes and a message board for asking questions and cooking videos. And we've had almost 500,000 people do it. It's in English, it's in Spanish, it's in Mandarin, and we have one in English, but for people from India with Indian recipes and Indian ingredients, and also a Japanese program as well. Lastly, I might mention that we've been troubled by the fact that in many medical centers, when people come in and they're asked about Alzheimer's, the doctors say, there's nothing you can do, but if your memory starts to fail, I can give you medication. What you soon discover is those medications are quite disappointing. They do not reverse the course of the disease, and you would have given anything to prevent this disease. So in January of this year, we started the Barnard Medical Center in Washington, D.C., where we work with patients no matter what their complaint is. We work with them on their diet first. So we help them to follow a healthy diet. If we see cigarettes in their pocket, we take them out. We help them to quit smoking and to adopt a healthy lifestyle. And if they also need additional medical care, we will provide it. But every single patient has full access to good nutritional teaching, including classes every week forever, for as long as they want to come. And they can bring their reluctant spouse to it as well, and they can all get healthier together. Oh, by the way, and if you don't mind, a shameless bit of self-promotion, I have a new book on diabetes, which I'll be talking about tomorrow, and this is coming out shortly. And when I write books, they're always designed as a tool to help patients, and I hope you might let people know that that's available for them. And there is a number of good resources out. My friend Michael Greger, who's speaking here as well, is letting people know a very important thing, how not to die. That's a great idea. And let me encourage you to pick up his book as well. And there are so many other good resources available too. All right? So the last thing that I just want to say is you will hear people say, no. You can't win. People love food too much. There's no way. And industry is selling foods, and people are a little food addicted, and you see advertisements. There's no way people will change. There is every reason to believe that people will change because we have been here before. 30 years ago, I sat in a room in my hospital, the George Washington University Hospital in Washington, D.C., where the doctors got together, and we had a serious discussion as to whether we could ban smoking. Now, it sounds silly, but at the time, we sold cigarettes in the hospital gift shop. I bought them, and I would light up my Merit menthols while my head of surgery would smoke Marlboros. And we would walk down to the doctor's lounge, and we would continue smoking there. Our patients could smoke in bed, and we were not foolish. We knew that cigarettes caused cancer, but we also knew that we had time. As long as I quit, I'll be okay. Well, at some point, it was time. And we decided, that's it. Let's get rid of the tobacco. We took it out of the gift shop. We said, you can't smoke in the hospital. You can't smoke in the hospital bed. And even the doctor's lounge is going to become non-smoking. We weren't sure how it would go over. Well, within 2 weeks, we knew we were right. And every other hospital did the same thing. And every restaurant did the same thing. And every airline did the same thing. And every government building did the same thing. And it can be a cold day in February in Washington, D.C., and there will be a man standing outside, shivering, smoking a cigarette, having the last puff before he's allowed into his non-smoking building. Well, that's where we are now with food. We know we have a problem. We know that when you look at children, what they have learned about food has nothing to do with what food really should be for them. They have learned about eating candy and junk and pizza and meat, and they think this is totally normal. They think it's normal to be overweight. They think diabetes is caused by being old. But we can change that. Because yes, there are a lot of people making money off unhealthy foods, and there are even more people making money off medications to treat the symptoms of unhealthy foods. But there are many more worried parents, worried teachers, and people in schools, and doctors, and nurses, and our problem is that we are silent. But when we speak up, and we share information resources. And when we do it in a fun way, when we say, I found a new recipe, here's a new book, here's a new website, here's a new DVD, here's a new taste. Come with me to a restaurant, let's have fun together. What you discover is that everything is positive. You have new tastes, wonderful new places to go, so many people who are making this change. You discover that the animals all wave a white handkerchief at you saying, thank you, this is great. The earth breathes easier too. All of your environmental friends say, you're a good person. So when we put this together, we really can win. And I am confident that one day, it'll be a cold February morning in Washington, D.C., and there will be some man shivering outside, having the last bite of his chicken wing before he's allowed into his vegan building, and that's what I want to see. Thank you very much. Thank you. Thank you very much. Thank you.